This happened on Christmas Eve, but I've only been able to sit down and write it out now. I work as a cop in a small town where usually nothing happens. Last summer, some children went missing, and I helped on the case. They thankfully were found, and I learned that there are creatures living in the dark. However, knowing that there were supernatural creatures out there didn't change how I lived. When we got a report of a man missing on one of the hiking trails, I didn't think anything strange happened. I just thought he got lost in the snow that was coming down. I joined the search party looking for him, while reviewing what we knew. A tall, dark-haired man signed in at the ranger station the day before, saying he would sign back out at the end of the day. When he didn't arrive, the rangers started to worry. They did a quick check along the trails, asking if anyone had seen him. They hoped he had just forgotten to sign out. When they found torn clothing and blood on the trail, the situation became more serious. It wasn't enough blood to know if he died, only that he was hurt in some way. The torn scraps of clothing matched the pants the man was wearing, so the rangers called us out to help. I was still a newbie when it came to search and rescue, so I stayed by my team to look through the trails. The first day, everyone came up empty. We started to think this was a body recovery mission due to the dropping temperatures. When the snow started to fall, we didn't think this man would make it if he was injured. On Christmas Eve, I went out searching again. To my great embarrassment, I got lost. It was pretty impressive that I was separated from my group when I was surrounded by professionals in the field. As we walked in the frozen woods glittering from the recent snowfall, I heard something. On the wind was the faintest voice calling for help. I heard something, I told my team leader over my shoulder. I'm just going to take a few steps over there to check it out. Hugh, wait for us all to go together, my leader replied. He took a step and got his foot caught in something under the snow. He swore, and I didn't wait as I was told. But he was only a few feet away and still within sight. I reassured him once again I was only going to take a few steps ahead. When I did so, I slipped down a slope I didn't see. Luckily, I wasn't harmed from the short fall. Just surprised from what had happened. I sat in waist-deep snow, cold and confused. My radio and phone were still working, and that was a good sign. I would just need to wait a few seconds for someone to see me so I could rejoin the team. My radio crackled at my shoulder. Hugh, where did you get off to? My team leader demanded, sounding stressed. I slipped down a little slope. I can climb back up on my own. I should be right in front of you, just a few feet away, I answered back. There was a long pause, and I listened, trying to locate my leader. Something wasn't right. I was so nearby I should have heard myself on the radio. But nothing stirred in those woods. I should have been hearing something, and yet it was as silent as the grave. I don't see you. You just disappeared right in front of me. It's weird. Try climbing up and then stay in one spot. All right, see you shortly. It wasn't until I climbed up to the top of the slope with some difficulty that I started to get worried. I should have seen my own footprints in the snow, and yet there were none. I couldn't see where I'd slipped a few minutes before, or any other signs of life. I started to suspect that something unnatural was going on when I didn't see anyone else in those woods. I tried my radio again, only to have nothing happen. I could listen to other channels, but nothing I said was getting out. My phone was doing the same thing. The GPS wasn't working, nor was it able to call or text. My radio crackled to life, and I jumped at the noise. We found Hugh. Team 11's going to bring him down to get warm. We'll keep looking without him. After that last message, the radio went dead. It no longer turned on even after I replaced the batteries. I stood frozen in fear, staring at the now useless radio. There weren't 11 teams out today. For some reason, I was stuck in the middle of the cold forest without anyone looking for me. I knew if I let myself panic, it would only bring my survival rate down. I thought I remembered how to get back to the trail. We didn't go very far before I was separated. And if that didn't work out, I would hunker down somewhere and I could try to stay warm and think of a different plan. I didn't know if something supernatural was going on. Now that I'd seen those sorts of things, I believed in them. I could be trapped in a loop again. By some miracle, I found the trail again. I may have been on the path, but I literally was not out of the woods yet. As I walked, I kept an eye on the time. It was getting dark earlier, and it felt like the temperature had dropped since I'd gotten lost. I knew I only had a few more minutes of walking until I reached the end of the trail, when I heard the sound that caused me to walk off in the first place. Someone screamed for help. I turned on my heels, nearly tripping myself from moving so fast. The sound was close, and desperate. I did something very stupid. Instead of walking to safety, I did the same thing that got me lost in the first place. I went towards the direction of the noise with my gun at my side. "Someone, please!" The voice was hoarse. It sounded as if he was screaming and running at the same time. I charged forward and nearly collided with the screaming man. Stepping aside at the last second, he flew forwards, tripping over into the snow. His heavy pack forced him off balance. At first, I wondered why he still had such a heavy thing on his back. Then I realized, without his supplies, he would not have survived in the cold overnight. I lifted him out of the snow, the panicked man coughing and sputtering. "Run! We need to run!" he shrieked, grabbing a hold of my arm. Before I could ask him what we were running from, the snow a few feet away from us started to burst up, as if something unseen was moving through it. Then I realized something was moving under the snow. Hauling the skinny man along, we both started to move as fast as possible with something on our heels. I felt him get caught on something. He jerked backwards as something grabbed his bag. As I pulled him forwards, I heard a ripping sound. He'd lost his water bottle pouch and all the contents, but we escaped with our lives. At least for the moment. We found the trail again, worn out from our run through the snow and the woods. Our second wind came in and we ran along the uneven ground as more snow along the trail kicked up following us. I wasn't even thinking. I was just running as fast as I could, trying to keep us safe. The man stumbled again. I wasn't quick enough to catch him or stop his fall. He crashed to the ground and I couldn't stop him right away. Panting, he sat up in horror as something burst out of the snow directly toward its victim. I only saw a vague shape of the creature covered in fur. It wasn't very big, but I knew it was deadly. Raising my gun, I fired. I didn't hit the creature, but scared it enough for it to dart back into the snow and away from us. Looking around, I didn't see any more of the strange creatures moving in the snow. They could be staying still, watching us, but I didn't see any sign of them. I quickly went over and helped the man up. I took his pack from him so he could move faster. He'd been lost for over a day already, and I was the strongest of the pair. We kept going, hoping we would see some help soon. He remained silent as we walked as fast as possible. Neither of us could run just yet. The longer we walked, the more the fear spread. Finally, we stopped, him exhausted and needing a break. I shared my water and a half-frozen granola bar. "Shouldn't we be at the end of the path yet?" he asked after eating and thanked me for the small meal. "Yes, we should. The problem is I don't recognize anything in the area. I made sure to remember what the trail out looked like just in case we got lost," I commented, looking over the unfamiliar trail. He looked even paler than before. His glasses slipping down his face, he adjusted them with trembling hands. I looked him over, wondering what he was doing out here. I've only worked in the area for half a year, but you start to notice what type of people go camping and hiking. He wasn't wearing any brands of clothing made for winter hikes or camping. His tent and sleeping bag rolled on his back looked like summer ones. I wondered how he wasn't freezing in his wet jeans. Maybe hiking was a new hobby he just picked up. I didn't introduce myself. I'm Hugh. I'm a police officer. We were looking for you. You're Richard, correct? I extended my hand for him to take. He shook it, looking a bit nervous. Richard was a very thin man. His fingers bony and cold even through his gloves. Good thing I found him as soon as I did. He would have starved to death in a few days, because his body already had nothing to work with. "Yes, I'm Richard Hott. My boss told me that hiking would be a great hobby for me, so I listened to him. I really should have waited until the summer. Wasn't expecting to get lost, but I brought a tent with me in case I did," he explained. We were walking as we spoke, and Richard kept looking in every direction. I didn't blame him. The sun was starting to set, and we didn't see anyone else. Those creatures could attack us at any moment. I wasn't certain if I could keep my hand steady enough to hit a small moving target in the cold and dark. Is your leg all right? We found part of your pants and some blood, I asked Richard, noticing he wasn't limping. He lifted his leg to show off his sock over the top of his torn pants. He gave me a bit of a shy look, as if he were embarrassed. I'm fine. One of those things grabbed my pants and I stabbed it with a knife I was carrying. But it got away with my knife still inside it, and I didn't even get a good look at it. I was impressed by him, even if he didn't kill the creature and had lost his weapon. He looked nervously at the setting sun and the clouds rolling in. Still, we hadn't gotten to the end of the trail. I didn't think we would before dark. Well, at least you only lost part of your pants. We'll figure out how to get safe, I said, hoping I sounded confident in my own answer. Any confidence left us when the sun went down. We agreed to set up for the night. Being on the trail felt safer, but the harsh wind made it impossible to keep the tent up. We found a space between some trees with low enough snow to attempt to start a fire. Richard was hunched over, building a very small fire pit as I hammered in the tent pegs. My hands felt frozen and numb before I was even finished. Off in the woods, small noises made us freeze in our work. Neither of us commented on how every sound could be one of those creatures. Finally, we had a fire set up, so we could huddle around trying to stay warm. It was pretty difficult finding enough twigs to burn. Our fire was small, but it was something. Snow started to drift down on the wind. I checked my phone to see if I could get any signal at all. Nothing, but the clock said it was 9 p.m. Merry early Christmas, I said to Richard in a low whisper. He gave me a strange look. Then a smile came over his face as he got closer, trying to steal any of my body heat he could. We could both die from mysterious creatures or just the elements. The only thing I could control is how we dealt with it. I found another granola bar in my pack. I offered it to Richard, only to have him shake his head. Forcing it inside his hand, I stared forwards, trying to think of something else we could do. In truth, I felt completely helpless. I wasn't some sort of tough monster hunter or super cop. I barely knew anything about camping or hiking. I'd been trying to learn whatever I could, only to have the information not stick in the slightest. At least my water bottle was metal. We could pack it with snow to melt it over the fire. We took turns drinking hot water that helped us stay warm and hydrated. You should rest. I can stay on watch. My phone should still work if I can keep it warm and off. I can wake you up in a few hours. Do you know how to fire a gun? Richard looked pale but nodded. He did not appear very interested in having to shoot at the creatures that attacked him. I made him show me that he could, in fact, aim properly. His hands shook in the cold, which was expected. Mine would do the same in the heat of the moment. I wished Richard was found by someone else. I could only do what I was able to keep us going. Wake me up in 2 hours, Richard asked. I nodded, knowing I was lying. He needed more rest than only 2 hours. As Richard was curled up inside the tent, I kept the tiny fire going. I kept checking my radio. It was tempting to check the time every 5 minutes. Every small sound caused my body to tense. The snow started to get heavier. The small fire wasn't giving enough heat. Soon I was trembling so hard it hurt. Still, I didn't want to wake up Richard to trade places with him. I wanted to stay outside for as long as possible. Maybe the cold was making me delusional. Growing weak, I nearly nodded off when a sound snapped me back to attention. It was a ripping sound coming from the tent. I shot up only to fall back because of my weak legs. Richard let out a cry of shock that motivated me to move. With numb fingers, I opened the tent as the other man frantically tried to get out. He piled on me as the tent was grabbed and dragged back into the darkness. Snow kicked up all around us. We did the only thing we could. We ran back to the trail. The moon reflected off the snow, letting us see. A growling sound came from our heels. As we stumbled onto the trail, small creatures darted out from the snow. I was clutching onto Richard in order to keep him upright. He was shaking from the sight of the furred creatures that finally showed themselves. Two stood on all fours facing us, growling away. I drew my gun, ready to shoot. What happened next caused me to freeze. The two creatures stood up on their hind legs. I could clearly see that instead of some small animal-looking beasts, they appeared almost human, like they were wearing fur coats. Small, as if they were children. Orange, glowing eyes stared at their prey. Both growled as their lips drew back, showing off countless sharp teeth. If I pulled the trigger, I would hit one of the creatures. It was taking small steps closer, but it didn't get out of the way of my weapon. One small move and I could injure it or kill this thing. "Shoot it," Richard hissed in a low whisper. My finger tensed, but it didn't fire the gun. No matter how much I wanted to protect the man next to me, I just couldn't fire at the small thing coming ever closer. My body refused to move in that moment. Richard became panicked, looking between the gun and the monster that nearly killed him. He didn't understand why I didn't already kill it. "It's only a child," I admitted in a distraught voice. I couldn't shoot it because it looked like a 5-year-old boy. A wild child with beastly features, but still a child. Richard looked betrayed at my actions. And I did betray him. I placed these creatures above both of us. I simply couldn't harm something so small. I let out a cry of regret as the creature burst forwards, knocking him to the ground. I watched in horror, still unable to fire my weapon as they tore at his jacket. He screamed while thrashing. Unable to get them away, he begged for help. Feathers from his coat flew, joining the snow. I let out a choked sob over the fact that I just let a man die in front of my eyes. "No, please, they're eating me." I shook at his voice. Unable to keep watching, I looked away, eyes shut tight. When I heard his final word, I opened my eyes to look back, confused. I could have sworn I heard Richard say blarg. It was such a comical sound, I didn't believe it. No one being torn apart would ever use such a word. "Children, come over here." This time, I was the one who felt betrayed. A voice I recognized called out to the small creatures, telling them to leave the man alone. They listened. Both ran on all fours away from Richard, so I could see his torn open and bloody chest. No one would be able to survive through those injuries. He looked dead. I was sure of it. Turning, I was ready to confront the new person who had just arrived. In the snow was a boy no older than 14. Pure white hair and red eyes. He was dressed in an oversized sweater, and at the time I didn't notice he wasn't wearing any shoes. I've come across him twice now, but I was still shocked to see him. "Ellie?" I choked out. The two creatures were circling him, but in a friendly way, as if they were cats receiving attention from their owner. Ellie may not look like much, but this small boy was powerful. All the supernatural creatures listened to him, if they wanted to or not. "Looks like you failed your test," the small boy commented, looking past me into the ruined chest of Richard. "What test?" I asked, utterly confused. Ellie gave a sigh. He was petting the small creatures, looking as if he was unsure of how to explain something so difficult. "I'm the Silver King, correct? Each king only lasts around 10 years. I need to find my replacement, but haven't put any effort into that at all. You appear to have qualities to be the next king, so I set up a test for you. You failed, because you're unable to kill a childlike creature, even if your life or if another depended on it. Now, Neff, please get up. You're giving poor Hugh trauma." Another shock came as Richard sat up. His coat torn, but chest healing until all the blood disappeared. He gave me a smirk that didn't look like it belonged to the man I'd met that day. His posture was completely different. His eyes changed from a dark color to a bright red. My jaw dropped open and looked between him and Ellie. I just couldn't believe I'd been set up. "You're," I said, still in shock. "Just fine. Kinda cruel to think you caused a man's death, but I suppose it needed to be done. King candidates are respected by supernatural creatures, and we don't mess with you, even if you fail your test. You're still an honored human recognized by our king, so you shouldn't have any issues with nasty creatures from now on. Hey, you want to go for a drink to make up for the faking my own death thing?" Richard, or rather Neff, explained with a raised eyebrow. No thank you," I said, dismissing his flirting as kindly as possible. Oddly enough, he didn't look offended, but rather flattered someone refused him in a kind tone. Ellie was walking toward us, and my state of shock needed to wait. I finally saw he wasn't wearing shoes in the snow and panicked. My coat and shoes were far too big for him. He may have been an all-powerful creature, but I just couldn't stop myself. I scooped him up and tucked him under my coat. I zipped it up so his head was sticking out just beside my own, and his cold feet tucked into my arms as I carried him. His face turned red, but he didn't struggle from being scooped up. When Neff let out a snort, Ellie narrowed his eyes. "Eat him," the boy said to the small creatures, who gladly listened. I stared as the taller man took off, trying to evade the fur-wearing feral children listening to their king. "Is he gonna be alright?" I asked, as I watched them bite at his heels. "Maybe. I don't care. You should be getting back home before someone realizes you're missing. The lie I created to get you alone will fall apart if you don't answer your phone, or if someone checks in on you at home," Ellie explained, looking pretty content being under my coat. I was still mildly traumatized by the night's events, but getting Ellie somewhere warm was what I focused on. I walked down the trail, finding my way out and my way to my car very quickly, because now nothing supernatural was keeping me in the woods. After some argument, I told Ellie he was going with me to the station. I was ordering a king around, and for some reason he listened. The station was empty when we got back. I led him to a spare room with a couch for a few minutes. I made some hot chocolate, and then grabbed something I'd put inside my desk, just in case our paths crossed again. He accepted the hot chocolate, saying he really needed to leave. "You can go after you're done your drink. But first, here. Merry Christmas, Ellie." Holding out a brown wrapped present to the boy, I waited for him to take it. He looked stunned, as if no one had ever gotten him a Christmas present before. The sad thing was, that fact may be true. I brought him the gift back in warmer weather, not knowing when I would see the boy again. Putting aside his hot chocolate for a moment, he took the small gift. Inside was a pair of black flip-flops. He looked at them with an odd smile on his face. "I didn't think you would wear shoes, even if I gave them to you," I admitted. Ellie looked a bit shy, trying his best not to let his smile show. With a small thank you, he started to sip at his drink again. "After you're done being king and pass it along someone else, you're, welcome to stay with me. I mean, if you don't have anywhere else to stay, that is. I know you're strong and all that, but I feel guilty because I'm the adult. I should be able to help you more." Ellie shook his head at my last statement. Looking over at the gift, he appeared distant, as if he were holding back an awful truth. Instead of revealing it, he simply smiled. "You're doing more than most. Knowing I'm welcome and I have a place to stay is more than I ever expected. I'm not a king to you. I'm just me. I haven't had that in a long time." He sounded almost sad at his own words. Putting aside his half-finished hot chocolate, he announced he needed to leave, but I wasn't having any of that. I ordered him to finish his drink, then he could go. With a bit of a grumpy tone, he relented. By the time Ellie did finish his drink, the poor boy was nodding off. He let me tuck him in on the couch. By the time I turned off the light, he was in a deep sleep. Without any doubt, this was a very rare time when he could just relax. I stayed at the office that night. I nodded off at my desk, sleeping on and off until the morning crew came in and startled me awake. I checked the spare room to see that Ellie was gone. His clean mug in the sink and his flip-flops gone with him. He'd even folded the blanket before he left. Ellie's a good kid. I wish more than anything he would take me up on my offer to let him stay with me. For now, he's off doing a demanding job. There are creatures in the dark. I know that because I've seen them. Some are in the forest, taking and eating people when they least suspect it. Others are made simply to give children a good scare on Halloween. I know that even if I was a king candidate, I would still come across these creatures and wonder what kind of danger I would get into. In the end, I felt it would all be worth it for a very small and very hard-working king. Become a channel member today for early access, bonus videos, and special emojis only available to members. Check out the description below or click the join button for more info. If you'd like another way to help support the channel, please consider joining my Patreon page at patreon.com/JordanGrupeHorror. As a patron, you'll get access to bonus videos and content. You'll be credited at the end of every video going forward, and if you decide to stay for 3 months, I'll name a character after you which will be featured in a Hollow's End story. Links to join the Patreon are in the description. Thanks everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment to help the channel continue to grow. And see you again next time at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you have a great night.